My sense of what's real and what's fake has never been as skewed as it is right now. It's like the last few days have been some kind of waking nightmare. But I don't think I've ever had a nightmare as straight up hopeless and sinister as the reality I'm facing right now. I can't really upload this post to my own right now, but I'm pretty sure someone else can for me. I guess we'll see if this ever gets out anywhere. God, I hope it does. I need to be heard and I need someone to believe me. This whole nightmare started when I was at my mom's house for supper over the weekend. Everything was going as fine as it usually does when my little sister brings her friend over nobody can stand but her, when I excused myself to go to the bathroom. I closed the door, did my business, and was washing my hands when I noticed through the mirror in the wall behind me a small little hole smack dab in the middle of the wall. I quickly spun around to make sure I was seeing things right, and sure enough, I was. I'd grown up in this house and still come over about once a week as an adult, and I knew for certain there was never a hole there. After patting my hands dry on the hand towel, I walked over to the wall to inspect the damage further. The hole was placed at about eye level and had about the diameter of a straw. Seeing as it was perfectly round and didn't damage any of the surrounding wall, I figured it was probably done on purpose by either my mom or sister, but I couldn't imagine how. I leaned in a little closer to see how deep this thing was, and was surprised to see nothing but darkness within. Considering how big the diameter was and how shallow this thing had to be, I figured I'd be able to see the crater it left, but all I could see was pure darkness. A little curious, I got out the flashlight on my phone and pressed my face a little closer to the wall, making sure to get my flashlight on there too. But it was still nothing but pure darkness. I leaned back with a slight frown on my face and turned the flashlight off. That's a little weird. I definitely had a few questions to ask my mom. But as I turned towards the door to my left to join everyone out in the living room, I saw out of the corner of my eye an intense flash of light. I quickly twisted my head back towards the wall, my eyes aimed directly at that hole. The blindingly bright flash never came back, but after a couple of seconds, I did see a much dimmer light brighten up the darkness within for just a brief moment, before dying out completely once again, like someone lit a match on the other end and blew it out. Having gotten my attention, I took a couple of steps back over and leaned into the wall once again, this time getting closer than I previously had and closing one eye so I could hopefully get as good a look at what was going on in there as I possibly could. And then, in the blink of an eye, I was staring out into my front yard shrouded in darkness through my bedroom window. Startled, I jumped up from my sitting position on the side of my bed and looked around wildly. How the fuck did I get here? Wasn't I just in my mom's bathroom a second ago? I looked down on my bed to see today's newspaper open to my side. This was odd because, like most people my age, I don't really go to the newspaper for my news, so it usually just goes straight to the garbage bin. I turned around and looked out of my window once again into my front yard, which is when I noticed a glaring detail that would serve to complicate my situation even more. It was pitch black outside. When I was over at my parents', it was about 5-6 p.m. tops. It was still fairly bright out. Right then, the phone in my pocket started ringing. I fished it out and saw first that my mom was calling me, and second that the time was 12:30 a.m. Where in the fuck did the last 6 hours go? How did I end up back here? I answered the call to my mother's panicked voice on the other end. "Greg, are you okay?" she said in a stern yet highly anxious voice. "Yeah, I'm a little confused, but I'm fine. Why?" "Well, that little stunt you pulled left everyone pretty worried," she responded. "Why didn't you answer any of our calls? Your uncle and I have been calling you non-stop all night, Greg." Wait, hold on," I interjected. "What do you mean the stunt I pulled? What happened?" "When you jumped out of the bathroom window you shattered, Greg. What else could I possibly be talking about?" My head started spinning at that statement. "I shattered your window? I jumped out of it. Mom, I don't know what's going on right now, but I have no memory of that whatsoever." Well, I've got more than a memory of it, Greg, and you're gonna be paying for it, she said matter-of-factly. Jesus Christ, you're lucky we didn't call the cops on you, Greg. Your sister was telling us to after what you said. What did I say? Once again, I don't remember any of this, Mom. Like, at all, I asked, hoping she'd stop making me practically pry this info out of her. I'm talking about when we were asking you what the hell you were doing through the front door as you ran across the driveway to your car, and you just yelled back, "I've got to get started on something," and then jumped in your car and drove off. I've got to get started on something, I repeated in my head. The fuck did I need to get started on? I had no idea what the fuck any of this was or meant, that the last 6 or so hours of my life were completely missing. I told my mom once again that I didn't know what the fuck happened, but that I was okay and safe and we would just talk more and try to figure everything out tomorrow. She didn't seem all too satisfied with that answer, but reluctantly agreed, probably because she was on the verge of slipping into a coma out of exhaustion. She's the kind of person to be asleep in bed by the time the Tonight Show comes on every night. I'm usually asleep in bed by the time the Today Show comes on, if I'm lucky. The next day was a Monday, and that means work. Thank God. I usually hate work, but after the bizarre incident last night, I was fine with anything, willing to push my life forward so that eventually the night before would just feel like one hell of a bad memory. I work at a little grocery store by my parents' place during the week as a cashier. It's not the best job in the world, but it puts food on the table. About 4 hours into the shift, when it was time for my break at about 2 p.m., I headed over to the private employee restroom to wash my hands before eating, like I do every single day on my break. But this time was a little different. Washing my hands, I looked up into the mirror and at the brick wall behind me. No. This wasn't happening. This couldn't be real. Turning around quickly, starting to feel a sliver of deja vu, my eyes locked on to the centimeter-sized hole somehow cut through the brick in the wall behind me. Sitting at almost the exact same height as the one in my mom's restroom with the same shape and everything, I was flabbergasted. I mean, can you imagine? Try for a second. I felt like I was in an episode of The Twilight Zone. I walked over slowly, yet again, this time looking to every corner of the small employee restroom I was in, for some kind of hidden camera, or sign that this was all a big prank or something. Unfortunately, I didn't find anything out of the ordinary, besides that lone hole punched through the wall. When I got within a foot or so of the wall, I stared at it closely, and then began to consider my options. I could walk out of this restroom, go eat my peanut butter and chocolate chip Cliff Bar in peace, and then go on back to work and about my day. But I knew I couldn't do that. I couldn't let myself. I had to investigate this further. I leaned in close, aligning my right eye with the hole. Where in my mother's bathroom I saw only darkness, now it seemed as though there was some sort of light off in the distance. And when I say off in the distance, I mean off in the distance. From the looks of it, this thing was hundreds of feet long and contained some sort of blazing fire at the end. But I knew that was literally impossible, so what it was for sure, I have no idea. As I began to move my head away from the wall in consideration of what to do next, I somehow found myself instead leaning back to rest myself against the driver's seat of my car. Startled yet again by what was at least the illusion of teleportation, I looked around erratically. Surrounding me was nothing but darkness. I fished out my phone to check the time, and my God, my jaw about hit the floor when I unlocked it. It was now about 12:30 a.m. again. Around 10 hours since I was in that bathroom. I slipped the phone back into my pocket and closed my eyes as I rested my head against the seat. I began to realize just how shitty I felt, like I'd just had a serious workout or had gotten beaten up in a fist fight or something. After resting for a few minutes, I decided I should probably try to figure out where the fuck I was, or at least if there were any trees directly behind me so I could get the fuck out of there. Turning on my car and then the lights, I could see now that I was nowhere good. An endless forest of trees surrounded me on both sides and in front. I opened the door and stepped out to my side, noticing instantly a horridly cold gust of wind blowing against my ankle. I looked down to see the blue jeans I had been wearing were ripped to shit, leaving a gaping tear down my right pant leg, effectively turning it into a pair of shorts. Opening up the trusty flashlight feature on my phone, I looked off into the distance, down behind the car. I couldn't make out much, but I could make out enough to tell that I had driven down some very sketchy forest path that probably hasn't been driven down in quite some time, considering all of the freshly run over weeds and grass my wheels had produced. Being out in the middle of nowhere, not knowing how I got there, clothes ripped, beaten, and worn down, my anxiety started to build up pretty quickly. I sat my phone down in the trunk of my car and began emptying my pockets for any other clues that might give me insight as to what the hell was going on. I took out my wallet, then the old pair of earbuds I always carry around with me, my vape pen, my keys, a pack of gum, then a small folded up gum wrapper. I placed everything on my trunk as I felt for anything else I could have missed, but that looked to be all of it. Staring at the contents of my pockets, nothing seemed even the slightest bit noticeable at first. But as I looked at that gum wrapper, which was white with blue foil on the outside, I began to notice a tiny black mark on a little bit of the white paper that was poking out. Curious, I picked it up and unfolded the wrapper. I'm not sure if anything could have prepared me for the message I found scrawled quickly but carefully across the old gum wrapper. It was short and composed of only one sentence. If you make a sound, your son is dead. My heart sank as I read the words. What was that supposed to mean? And who the hell wrote it? As I studied the handwriting, comparing and contrasting with my own, I began to find my answer. I paused for a moment and then hurriedly grabbed everything I'd sat on top of my trunk and shoved them back into my pockets. I then unlocked the trunk. Lifting it and peering inside, my knees instantly began to buckle. I looked away and stumbled backwards as I lifted my hand to my face to instinctually hide my gasp. I didn't get a good enough look to fully understand what I had seen though, and knew I was going to have to walk back over and bear another look. And that second look has been ingrained in my mind since, and I don't think it'll ever leave me as long as I have a mind to think. Inside was a corpse, but it wasn't just that. That would have been bad enough, but in this case, every single limb seemed to have been carefully sawn off and placed in an open cardboard box next to the body. The only thing still attached to this woman's body was her head, her facial expression frozen in a vacant, wide-eyed stare. I feel it's probably worth noting that there wasn't a drop of visible blood on the floor of my trunk, on the cardboard box, or any of the limbs or body parts therein. I don't even know how that's possible, but then again, lots of impossible stuff seemed to have been taking place lately, so why should I even be surprised? I slammed the trunk closed and almost immediately vomited to my right. Not much came up considering I'd hardly eaten that day, but it seemed to make me feel a little better regardless. I leaned against the trunk and thought about what in the hell I was gonna do next. I had a dismembered corpse in my fucking trunk. What could I possibly even do? The only reasonable thing I could do would be to call the cops, but that's gonna leave me looking like the murderer. But then again, I can't just dispose of this poor woman's body, because that would definitely make me guilty without a doubt, and I don't think I could live with myself, having taken part in a murder. I eventually came to the conclusion that despite the possible consequences, I had to call the police. But upon pulling out my phone and looking at the screen, my nightmare seemed to begin all over again. A perfectly round hole had been cut through the middle of my cell phone screen, but just like all of the others, seemed to go on forever, or lead to some kind of an eternal dark void. I closed my eyes. Please don't tell me this is happening again. For the love of God, don't let me. I opened my eyes to stare out of the window into my front yard. I glanced down to see I was now back in my room, sitting on the edge of my bed. I didn't need to look anywhere else. I knew how this worked at this point. As I sighed, I leaned forward to rest my elbows on my knees. I stayed like that, just savoring the peace for a moment, and tried to keep myself from completely losing it. I glanced to my side to see another newspaper on my bed exactly where the last one was a day or so ago. I leaned back up and picked up the paper. It was today's date, or maybe yesterday's at this point, which was odd because if my memory serves me correctly, I don't receive the paper on Mondays. I noticed a page that had been folded over inside and opened it up. A short article had been circled with some kind of black pen or Sharpie. I read it as my eyes began to fill with tears. Jacqueline Smith, a 24-year-old Caucasian woman, was declared missing Sunday night after she failed to make her way home from work. The authorities ask you to keep an eye out for a woman in her mid-20s with a height of about 5 foot 8 inches, approximately 120 pounds, with black hair and blue eyes. Below the passage was a photo of the woman. I'd never seen that face a day in my life up until today, when I looked into that slaughterhouse of a trunk. As I was staring at the picture, trying to make even the slightest bit of sense of it all, I heard a loud banging on my front door, followed by a man's voice screaming, "Police, open up." I looked up to see out of my window about 3 cop cars parked outside my house at weird angles, like they had just driven up as fast as they could and parked as soon as they reached a stop. Well, anyways, long story short, I opened the door and was almost immediately arrested on murder charges. I told them I didn't do it, but I bet you can guess how much they believed that. Cuffed and in the back of one of their patrol cars, they drove me down to the police station where they put me in a back room for questioning. They started off by asking me if I knew Jacqueline Smith, which I responded to by saying no. The only time I'd ever even seen her in person was when I found her dismembered corpse in the back of my trunk, but I was so uncertain of reality at this point, I figured I should probably keep that to myself. After trying to convince them I didn't do anything and don't even know her or what happened to her, which was actually kind of the truth, they started getting pretty frustrated. After going back and forth with them a bit longer, the cop who was leading the whole thing asked his buddy to go grab the tablet. Handing the electronic over to the police officer, he gave an overdramatic sigh and said, "Well, let's see if any of this rings a bell." As the video began to play, a slight smirk began to quiver at the sides of his mouth. The video was very simple, just a lone camera setup that doesn't move throughout the entirety of the footage. But it was what the footage was of that about killed me. It was shot in my basement, apparently by me. After starting the recording, I walked out from behind the camera and began my speech. "Hello," the me in the video began to say, with a surprisingly calm and collected attitude given what I was sure was about to come next. "My name is Greg Stanton. I live on 224 South 7th Street, and my phone number is 223-555-4372. I wanted to take a moment to talk to you about the project I've been working on lately. I abducted the woman I chose last night as she walked to her car, jumping out from behind another vehicle with a gun and telling her to hand me the keys. She did, and once we both got inside, I handed them back to her and we drove to my house. I put a bottle of water and a few baby carrots in the trunk and kept her there overnight. Didn't want her starving or anything," the me in the video said with a slight chuckle. "Today I decided to finish everything up so I can go ahead and put all this behind me. I should be done by tonight and then I can... well, we'll see. Oh, and before I go, Jacqueline wanted to say hi real quick." I watched myself walk out of frame, only to walk back in with my hands behind my back a few moments later. "Alright, Jacqueline, say hello," I said, pulling out from behind my back one of her severed arms, waving it back and forth in an overly goofy fashion as blood spilled from its gaping stump. Yeah, I still gotta soak up a lot of blood. But my project will be spotless when it's finished. The other me looked up and thought for a moment before looking back into the camera one final time. My name is Greg Stanton, and I killed Jacqueline fucking Smith. And with that, my doppelganger walked behind the camera and ended the recording. The police officer put the tablet down on the table and leaned back in his chair. "How'd I get this?" he said. I began to try to say, but I just couldn't reach the end. I was so confused and disturbed and disgusted with myself, even though I know I didn't do it. And yet I was on camera enthusiastically admitting to a horribly gruesome murder. Dear God. "Yeah, I'm guessing you're gonna say you don't know, right?" the cop interjected. "Well, I'll go ahead and tell you. You sent this video to your mother about 3 hours ago through Facebook Messenger. From there, she sent it to us, and now we're here," he finished, raising his hands at our surroundings and looking around. I nodded and never said another word. It's been a day since then now, and I'm just waiting on my trial now. My mom hasn't tried to contact me or answer any of my calls. Can I blame her, though? What would you do if someone you love admitted to murdering some random girl and dismembering her body? I'm not sure what I'd do for sure, but I do know that, despite the video evidence, I did not kill Jacqueline Smith. I didn't do it. I couldn't do it. But none of that matters because everything points to me. I won't blame you if you do, but please do not believe that video. It may have looked like me. It may have been in my basement. It may have been in my very own fucking body for all I can make out. But that thing, that creature, was not me. Until I have the chance to make my case to the jury, I suppose I'll just be spending all of my time in this cell, laying on my sad excuse for a bed, writing on these pieces of paper, and staring at that tormenting little hole that appeared in the concrete wall overnight. Thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed today's narration. I want to give a huge thanks to last month's $5 and up patrons: Scorchin O, Rain S, Samuel S, Coney Pone, Gavin KL, Amanda W, PDR, Nabby, Gabriel B, James T, Benjamin K, Tim D28, Mr. Creeps, Tyler P, and all the other $5 and up and $2 patrons on screen as well. All of your support makes these narrations possible, and I appreciate it a ton. If you'd like to join these lovely ghouls, I'd appreciate it if you check out my Patreon page. For just $1 a month, you'll get an exclusive narration that will never, ever be uploaded to my channel. Usually, one a bit too extreme for YouTube. So that's at least one extra video every month for just $1, if not more. For $2 a month, you'll get thanked in the end scroll of every video, and for just $5 a month, I'll shout you out at the end of multiple videos a month personally. You also get exclusive Discord roles for those perks as well. If you'd like to chat with me for a bit, you can join me on a monthly live stream for just $10 a month and get a signed merch sticker for $25 a month. And if you're in the market for some horrifying shirts and hoodies, you can head on over to my Teespring store in the description as well. And don't forget to follow me on Twitter at @2ndClancy. I want to thank you all for watching, and I will see you all next time. Have a good night, everybody. Cheers.